Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arseholics podcast on a Wednesday evening. It's the North London Derby preview. I've got Mize. How's it going, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. Looking forward to Saturday. But yeah, I'm doing all right. How are you?
Not bad, mate. Not bad. We just, as Mize knows, we had a bit of last minute hiccup. We had expected a special guest on the show, a Tottenham fan, which we reluctantly decided to accept onto the show. It's like it felt dirty in some ways, just having an Arsenal pod and having a Tottenham fan on. But we accepted that, and we made the sacrifice, and he got too drunk and he didn't turn up. That's a true story. He's literally just turned up because he's too battered. So very very disappointing. So sorry to anyone who actually was joining because they wanted to get the hear the opinions of a Tottenham fan. And John in the comments asking, is it Saturday yet? Well, I think that guy thinks it is Saturday, and he's started early. But anyway, enough said about him. We're going to crack on anyway. Miles and I, I think we're too excited for this game not to talk about it. It's, man, like, international break is rubbish anyway. It's just a complete waste of time. They tried to make it more interesting with the Nations League, and I don't know. In my opinion, it isn't. Miles, have you been dying for the international break to be over as well? Or is it just me?
It's not been as bad. I think I've got on with a few other things outside of football, which has been good. I guess that what's going on with England's been quite interesting. Not that I like, I'm an England fan. I like watching England. I like England doing well, but just the fact that it's a World Cup coming up, and the last couple of games have quite a big significance in terms of who's playing, who's not playing, who's going to get picked, all of that. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, like you tweeted earlier, Raj, proper football's back in a couple of days, and I am glad that the international break is almost over.
Yeah, and it's always a precarious situation, isn't it, with international break, because you're just hoping and praying none of your players get injured, and you do that anyway. But you do that especially if you've got a North London derby coming up on the weekend, don't you? And we went into this international break with a few question marks over the fitness on some of our players, and it was a bit concerning to see some of them go at all. And it's just been a very hairy couple of weeks as a result, because it feels like all the players that we had question marks over their fitness, basically didn't do too well fitness wise over the break, isn't it? So let's talk specifically the players in question really that had fitness concerns anyway going into the international break were Tomiyasu, Tierney, and Partey. Really, those were the main three, I think. What's your feelings on the three of them? Because they're all kind of interesting scenarios, aren't they? They all kind of, there's still, even though they were, I think, all in some ways, the international break was a bit shorter for them than planned. It's still not completely out of the question that they could start in the weekend.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Like, so you're probably going to have to kind of update me or correct me, but so Thomas Partey, did he play one game? And then
I don't think he played at all.
He didn't play at all. Was it the first game?
He pulled up. Yeah, exactly. He pulled up in, and that was interesting. The way it was worded and everything was that it was. Sometimes players in training, players when they're warming up for the game, you see someone kind of clearly roll an ankle or feel something really uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden it's like it's a very obvious thing that just happened in the warm up. From everything I've read about it, it wasn't really like that. He was basically just warming up, and then he went and told the coaches, I don't quite feel right. I don't want to start, and that was it. And then he didn't play any part in the two games.
Yeah. And I'm kind of hopeful that, look, the last thing we need is another Thomas Partey injury, right? After the last couple of seasons, and we've missed him sorely, and especially with no El Neni. Like, I was thinking about this, just looking forward to the Spurs game, and specifically with Partey, the two kind of key players that I'm very anxious about is Thomas Partey and Ødegaard. Thomas Partey, because I think that battle in midfield on Saturday could potentially just be a bit of a war, really. When you think about like the players that they've got, especially Højbjerg, I think we're going to need Thomas Partey. We're short in that area anyway, and I would be reluctant to have to bring. I'm not saying he would do this. I'm not saying Arteta would do this, but with no Thomas Partey against a pretty aggressive midfield of probably Bentancur and Højbjerg or maybe Bissouma, would he look at bringing Granit Xhaka back into that area, and then that kind of affects the whole
balance. Yeah,
the whole kind of game plan, how he's been doing going forward. And maybe I'm overthinking it. So, but regardless, Thomas Partey is such a big miss for us. So yeah, massively concerning. But I guess the good thing is, like, if you look at it glass half full, it's a good thing that he flagged it and he didn't play, because imagine he'd played and 10 minutes in he was taken off or whatever, like that would have been even worse. So yeah. And who are the other players? So Tomiyasu, didn't he play 90 minutes in one game?
Yeah, I think he did, but I think that then he returned after the first game, and it was one of those that the statement from Japan seemed to indicate that it was almost like a request from the club. So it didn't really, indicate that it was because he got injured, but it did indicate that Arsenal had something to do with the reason why he went back. So I think in a best case scenario, it was a complete pre-planned thing, and he was only ever going to do one game.
Yeah. And I remember, like, wasn't it Man United? Wasn't it? Maybe not Sir Alex. Someone, I'm sure there was a manager that used to do. Was it Sir Alex? Yeah,
he's still all the time. And this is the thing. This is some of the feedback on Twitter, right, has been that maybe actually we're just doing. We've learned from not necessarily our mistakes, but maybe Arteta is being a lot more assertive with the national team managers and is effectively just being very, very clear about his expectations. Because I think that, if you think about it this way, right, and Jurgen Klopp's sort of been alleged to do this quite a lot. A lot of his players pick up these mysterious injuries prior to an international break, and he doesn't go, and they don't go. If you think about it, right? Like, managers must kind of, as long as you can get the player on board, it might be really easy to just come up with a mystery injury, isn't it? And I think maybe when you're in a team that's doing really well, maybe the players are actually more likely to be willing to do that. And I wonder whether that gives you some leverage. And I wonder whether Arteta is effectively saying the same thing. Or there's like an unspoken thing, because it is interesting. What happened to Partey and Tomiyasu kind of specifically. I think Tierney's was less kind of interesting in the sense that his just seemed like a very straightforward, he got injured during a game and came off, and that was that. But I think the interesting thing about the injury, it seems like it was a head injury. So actually head injuries tend to not keep you out for very long, so maybe that will be okay. Because do you think that if Tierney's missing, does that give you concerns over the weekend?
Yeah, because so I've not really, as you can probably tell, I've not really kept up to date with the injury situation, and I guess because we're still a couple of days away from the game, we haven't had an update from Arteta or the club. But Zinchenko, is he?
Zinchenko, it doesn't seem like there is a massive concern over Zinchenko. And with Odegaard played 90 minutes for Norway over the break, so it doesn't seem like there are any concerns over Odegaard. I think that Zinchenko is more of a question mark, because I'm not sure he did actually get called up to the Ukraine squad, and that might have been precautionary. I don't know, but Odegaard, going back to what you said first, you said the two players that you're most concerned about, Odegaard and Partey. I think Odegaard's the one where I think there's the most comfort around, given he went and played, did the full round for Norway. And that makes you wonder. Sort of, we don't always get transparency of these things. It makes you wonder whether Odegaard's kind of mysterious knock kind of before the last game was actually just Arteta deciding that was a good game to rest him, knowing that he would go on international duty. I guess being captain of Norway, it's he was always going to go and always going to give his best. So I wonder. I mean, who knows? But it is big. And can I go back to Partey for a little bit, because I think that is, we've lost one game this season. The one game we lost was when he didn't play, isn't it? And when we dissected that game, a lot of it was kind of down to Man United breaks and coming through the centre of midfield. And so it's obviously, if that's our only example of a game that we've lost, and him not being there, not being in that crucial role, as we discussed after that game, Tottenham could actually pose a very similar threat in terms of counter-attack. So does that fill you with more confidence if Partey is going to play, given all of that?
Yeah, so I was having to think about how this game might pan out and how we might set up, how Spurs are likely to set up. And I guess now we're 7 games in, you can kind of, especially with Spurs, you're starting to get a flavour for how we expect both teams to set up. And I think it's not. I think just like I was saying before, the midfield battle I think could potentially be key, and you just want Thomas Partey in there because I think, as we've said so many times, right, as soon as you take Partey out, the next option is a serious downgrade, basically. So and he's like the only world class player we have in that position. So for that very reason, I think he's just crucial to us having a really successful season, and that's why he could be really important on Saturday. I think with Spurs it's quite interesting, like in terms of like I was saying, how they're going to set up, how they're going to come up against us, because obviously, like when you look at the stats for Spurs this season, they don't tend to really dominate possession. They seem to be comfortable and capable of soaking up a lot of the opposition having the ball, basically, and a lot of opposition kind of attacking in their defensive third, so the opposition attacking, and then they either seem to be able to still be very effective in terms of scoring goals on the counter, or they also have the option of going quite direct as well. When you've got a striker like Harry Kane, you can pretty much just play balls up to him, and he is probably one of the best in the league in terms of hold up play, flick ons, link up play, all of that kind of stuff. So, and he is also able to, as we know, drop deep, and he can be that he can play that number 10 role as well when you've got Richarlison and Kulusevski and Son running off him. So I think there's loads of danger. I think, and I think this is why it's going to be such an interesting game. Aside from the fact that it's a North London derby, there's just going to be so many kind of interesting battles and factors. Like the one I'm really looking forward to is seeing how Saliba does against Kane, assuming him and both of them kind of have a bit of a duel, because we've obviously been so impressed with Saliba so far, but I think this is going to be a bit of a different challenge in some ways to what he's faced so far. You're probably talking the second best striker in the league now that Haaland's here, basically the best striker in the league over the last few seasons. And like I said, for all of the things that Harry Kane offers and Harry Kane gives, it's a real challenge for Saliba physically. And also, how, when Kane does drop deep, for example, how are our centre-backs going to defend against that? How are we going to deal with that? Because as soon as you pull, we saw it against United, right? As soon as one of the centre-backs gets pulled into midfield or pulled into that kind of defensive midfield area, we're exposed, and we got hit on the counter a couple of times, more than a couple of times against United, and it was really, really costly, basically. So, I probably kind of answered your question in a bit of a roundabout way about Thomas Partey.
No, you have. And before I get onto the question on the screen, right? The Saliba Kane battle, a lot of analysts suggest that the closest striker to Kane in terms of the style that they are playing in their current team right now is Ivan Toney at Brentford.
Yeah.
In terms of style and role, it seems like that is, and if that is an omen, it's a very good omen for us because we did very well with Ivan Toney. But obviously, the class difference between Ivan Toney and Kane is still, you'd have to say, quite. Yeah,
he didn't get a touch of the ball, did he, Toney? Really, he was just and I think that was probably because we were so dominant in other areas of the pitch and with the ball, and I think he just didn't really get a sniff for that reason. I'm not sure. And so on balance, when you compare Brentford and Spurs as sort of two teams, I do expect Spurs to have a bit more of the ball, and I do expect Spurs to potentially be happy, three at the back, like I said, soak up a lot of the possession, soak up a lot defensively, allow us to have a bit of the ball, and potentially look at hitting us on the counter, or direct balls with lots of runners, pacey runners that can get in behind, kind of like what United did to us a couple of weeks ago.
Agreed. Going on to Kish's question. Kish, cheers for the question. He says, are you all worried that the onus is on Arsenal to go out and get a statement win, especially after the way it went wrong last season? Appreciate that you are always expected to win a North London derby. Myers, what do you reckon?
I don't look at this game and think we need a statement win, really, because we're top of the table. I think it's important we don't lose, because I think if we lose, I'm not sure if it necessarily sends a message, but that is a pretty big marker for Spurs. Like that's a statement win for Spurs. They'll go top of the table potentially for a short period of time, but they'll go top of the table if they beat us. And they haven't won at the Emirates in I think our home record's pretty good. I think it's something like I could be making this up, like 10 or 11 games.
You have to go back quite far. I think you have to go back to. I may be wrong, but I think you have to go. But yeah, when Yunus Kabul scored, I think you have to go back to that game.
Yeah. Coming back to the question, I don't necessarily look at this game and think Arsenal absolutely have to win. It's not really that. It's more, I really want to maintain the distance between us and Spurs, because I think come the end of the season, that I think us and Spurs are going to be pretty tight in terms of positions and points. And I think, obviously, I want to win the game, of course, right? But I don't think it'll be a disaster if it's a draw. I don't think it'll be a disaster at all. I think, and I think also, like, I don't know, hopefully that what happened at Old Trafford, like everyone, the narrative is now, like, there's always seems to be a narrative with Arsenal, right? So it's kind of like, we played crap teams, basically. That's what everyone's saying. And the one decent team we played, apparently, was United, and we lost that game. We failed that test. So, if we lose this game on Saturday, those people that are kind of pushing that agenda are just going to push it even further, which will be really annoying more than anything. But I don't know. How do you feel? I don't really feel like we absolutely have to win the game. Obviously, I want to win the game, but I don't think a draw will be a disaster.
I agree. I think that the interesting thing is the way that and Kish, I agree with what you're saying about there being potentially a little pressure on, not that much pressure on Spurs. Look, I think the way that the game is set up is really, really, really weird, because the game is set up in a way where both teams will play their plan A's for this season. Both plan A's, for the way both teams are playing, are what you would probably want to play against the other team, if that makes sense. So Spurs under Conte, for example, right, this season have been a team that are happy to concede possession, and they are just so potent on the counter. They concede so many touches in their own third. They concede so many. Now, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that's completely tactical, because you could argue and say that's not tactical. Their midfield just keeps getting bypassed. That's kind of the argument against it. But the fact is, they do concede a lot of possession in that third, and we have so much possession in that final third. So in a way, if you're Arteta, you're saying to Arsenal that, his players, the way that we set up and the way that we play normally, we can really do this. We can really get at them. But Conte's probably saying, you know how to play against this all day long. You've been doing it all season. We're set up to do this. So the interesting thing is, whose plan A comes off the best? That's basically it. And if Arsenal play the way that they're playing, they will be allowed space. They will be allowed to get into Tottenham's kind of third. And if we do that, and if we take our chances, if you do that early, like we did last season, and you score a couple of goals early, then it'll be very, very hard for Tottenham, because then they have to go to a plan B, right? So it's sort of similar, right? Because if Tottenham then hit us on the counter a couple of times, and we have to go to our plan B, I've got no faith in our plan B this season so far, because we haven't seen it. Like, the only time we've seen anything that glimpses a plan B for us this season was against United. And then it all went, like, it just looked like an absolute mess when we went plan B for that, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I pretty much agree. I mean, I think so in terms of how I feel like we should come out, not so much how we should come out, but like all season, and the way that Arteta wants to play, we play a very high press. And I'm hopeful. Maybe it's a little bit of blind hope. I don't know, but I'm hopeful that the way that we're pressing, how aggressive the press is. When you look at how Jesus does it, how Martinelli does it, how Erdegaard does it, I really don't rate. For example, Lloris. I don't really rate Lloris that highly, and I think there's a mistake in him. And I'm just kind of hopeful that if we're really, really aggressive from the start in terms of how we press and how we just try desperately to win the ball back. I know that Spurs can probably get out of that press if they really want to, but I'm kind of hopeful that might lead to potentially some defensive mistakes, like Lloris, just kicking the ball straight to one of our players when he tries to clear it, that kind of thing. And it's just basically one of our players forcing them into a mistake.
I mean, Lloris's record at Arsenal is really bad at the Emirates. His record is really poor. It's like almost on a good day he'll concede only 2. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's really poor. Sorry, carry on.
No. So like, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, I just hope that we come out and really play playing the same way, the same kind of attacking fashion, and really wanting to get the ball back and trying our best to get the ball back high up the pitch, as we've been doing so far this season and as we've seen for most of this season, because then I think we will really cause Spurs problems. I'm not saying we're necessarily going to win the game as a result, because as we're not escaping, we're not trying to hide from the fact that Spurs do have a lot of dangerous players down the other end of the pitch as well, and they are going to cause us problems. But yeah, I think you saw what happened last season, right? The home game last season, it was a similar kind of point in the season in terms of, it was around, I think, September, October time. And I know last season was a bit different because the Spurs game was like liftoff for our season, basically. But the crowd, and I guess we're going to get onto this at some point, the way the crowd will 100% absolutely back this team, even if we go 1-0 down. Like, I genuinely think that could be a factor as well, kind of like how it was a factor for them.
Yeah.
For them at the back end of last season, right? Like, we were at that game, me and you, and the loss, and the crowd were like, have to give them props. Like, the crowd were amazing. The stadium was amazing. It was absolutely rocking that night, and it must have helped, and it must have played a factor. And we did see, a few Arsenal players just really didn't turn up that day. And again, I'm hopeful that will play a part. Fingers crossed.
Agree with you, mate. And Prasat's made a comment here. Spurs are a different. I think I wrote it. Yeah, Spurs. No worries. Spurs are a different outfit under Conte. It will be a great match for the neutrals. So this is the thing where I agree with Prasat. There is it from a mentality perspective. I watch Tottenham now. They remind me so much of the mentality that Chelsea had under Mourinho initially, where basically you just watch them and you think, well, you're getting dominated. They go through periods of matches where it didn't look like they were in it. It looked like, they weren't the better team, but they always, and what they proved, over time, was that never bothered them. They were never worried. They knew that they would have their moments, right? Yeah. And Tottenham looked like that. Like, Conte seems to have instilled this belief in them that it doesn't matter if you're getting, if you're getting run over, you hang in there. You just hang in, and we'll get, we'll get our moment. Chan is clearly very very positive about our chances. You're right, Chan. They have only won 1 in 28 at the Emirates, but this is but the thing that concerns me a little bit. I think there's a couple of things that concern me, but when I look at last season and Tottenham taking 6 points off Man City, and our style of play right now is much closer to what Man City were doing last season, in the way that Man City played last season. Man City play a little differently this season with Haaland, but the way that Man City were playing last season, are what we're doing now is a bit more like that. And they were excellent. They, as in Spurs, were excellent at just soaking it. And even when they went concede a goal, just kind of hung in mentally, and they got 6 points. So that was just, and I worry a little bit about that. I think that it'll be very nervy for us as fans on Saturday. And yeah, I mean, Nish with the point there, fossil football incoming from Spurs, rubbish to watch. I mean, it's bloody true. It's awful. It's terrible to watch. But I worry about it because it's so, the mentality is there to just soak it up. I mean, but what do you think? I mean, Miles, we don't have a Spurs fan to, comment on here because, he got wasted. But if you were a Tottenham fan,
yeah,
like what would you think right now? Because they are doing it really well, right? So as much as they play crappy football, they're doing well. So what do you think? If you're a Spurs fan, are you okay with that?
I really wanted to ask him that question. We're not naming him, but yeah, I really want to ask him that question as well.
He's calling me, by the way. I reckon he's like, can I rock up in about 20 minutes? But
let him join. Why not? We'll gun him for a bit. Look, to be honest, if I'm a Spurs fan, I kind of look at it and I think, am I really that bothered if we're playing crap football and if we're not seeing, like, Spurs seem to have this thing like that they have always played good football, and there's like the Spurs way, which I think is, well, I don't know, like, I wasn't around in the 70s, but it sounds like bullshit to me. Like, when have Spurs ever played good football? Maybe they did, I don't know. But I think if you're a Spurs fan of kind of our age and you've just basically watched your team be dominated by Arsenal for sort of 20, 25 years and pretty much haven't seen your team basically not win a trophy, I think if you're looking at this current squad and you're looking at some of the signings they made in the summer, and you're looking at basically Antonio Conte as, you know, their man, I'd be pretty excited, to be honest, because there's every chance that he could. I'm not saying he's going to win them a trophy, because like a trophy is a trophy. It's you know, there's so much involved and so much luck involved, but they probably got their best chance in a long time under Conte, and they've managed to keep hold of Harry Kane. They've got, like I said, some really good. Like, they've made some really good signings, and they've kind of added to what they had going forward. When you look at Richarlison, Kulusevski, some really, really kind of some really good players, basically. And so I think that they've got every reason to be optimistic. You know, I think they've got every reason to be positive. I think if you're Spurs, you probably just look at, similar to kind of Arsenal as well, right? You probably look at United are in a bit of a transition. Chelsea are basically, you know, have just changed managers. You kind of don't know what you're going to get from them this season. Liverpool seem to be faltering a little bit. So there's every chance that they could get top four again. And I think, yeah, like in terms of potentially doing something a bit more tangible, i.e. getting some silverware in the trophy cabinet, yeah, like they're probably one of their best chances that they've got to do that over the next couple of years, assuming Conte hangs around in the last probably 10 or 15 years.
Nav with the comment saying, "Great chat, guys. Thank you, Nav." I mean, it's the thing is, right? Like everything you say, I agree with. And I think with signings wise, I think they can. You know, Spurs fans are going to be. It's hard to be not, you know, impressed or pleased with the fact that Kulusevski's been doing so well. Richarlison looks like, you know, okay, the price tag was very high, but you know, he looks like he's providing real good competition in those places, and is really good off the bench. Bentancur has been good, but is it a concern a little bit where it feels like, if you were a Tottenham fan, would you be concerned that it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect to some extent between the direction of some of the transfers the club wants to go in and what Conte wants? So, for example, I mean, I don't know if Bissouma was a Conte player, but Conte is now very openly saying that Bissouma hasn't really adapted to his tactics. And you know, I don't know if you saw that comment from him. He basically said that, you know, he said the only player in this squad that's struggling to meet my tactical requirements is Bissouma, which I thought was a really interesting thing to say. And I think that if he was a player that you signed, that you really wanted, I'm not sure you say that as a manager, because it makes it look like you've kind of missed a trick there. And when they signed Jed Spence, who was really highly rated, right? Like, and he played amazingly against Arsenal when he was, at Nottingham Forest. He made the comment right after they signed him that basically said words to the effect of, "I didn't want to sign him. The club wanted to sign this young player, so you know they've done it." And it was really interesting. And he said that, and you know what connected to that is probably the fact that Jed Spence has hardly had a kick. So it's very different from what's going on at Arsenal right now, where it feels like every single signing is truly Arteta Edu kind of signing. They're completely aligned. It's completely part of the plan, and looks a bit and it looks a little bit more disconnected with Tottenham. I mean, do you still think that there is a chance that Conte is not completely committed to Spurs? There's all this kind of talk about Juventus getting rid of Allegri and him being, you know, back on Juventus' radar. Is there anything in that, do you think?
Yeah, like I think with Conte, like even what happened last season, I think he hadn't been long since he'd been at the club, and was it Burnley they lost to, and he had that little outburst.
Yeah.
I think you're always going to get that with a manager like Conte. And I think ultimately, like if you think about it, he is better than Spurs in terms of his record. I know he hasn't got a great record in Europe, but you know he's won the Premier League. He's a sought after manager generally, I would say.
Yeah,
I think
won Serie A for fun, didn't he, as well?
Yeah. So when the big jobs do come around, or when the big clubs have vacancies, his name is not often mentioned. So I kind of think you're just going to get that with Conte. It's interesting about that. So I hadn't seen those comments about the players. I think the Jed Spence one's interesting. It's interesting, but I think, you know, he's still very, very young, right? So it's kind of like, it's not like he's going to be looking to looking to kind of get out of the club as a result of maybe not playing, not getting any minutes so far this season. Like he's got a long career ahead of him. I think I hadn't seen the Basuma one, so that is quite interesting. And I don't know, it felt like last season what Conte, but the message he was delivering to the board was, you need to back me if you want me to do something in this job. And they've obviously backed him, but then there is always that, Daniel Levy's a pretty, what's the word? He's a pretty, it's either his way or no way pretty much. And Levy hasn't been scared of making, big calls in the past. When you think of like Pochettino, for example, Mourinho, etc. So maybe it was a Levy signing. I guess we'll never really know. But again, Basuma's pretty young as well, right? So I think I don't know. I guess he's like mid-20s. So I think there's probably time for him to kind of adapt to a new way of playing, a new style, and all of that. And they're I wouldn't say they're well stocked in that area, but they've got Højbjerg and they've got Bentancur, right? So you put them in the starting 11 and no one's really going to raise any questions and say, oh, why is Basuma not starting? It's not like with us where if Partey doesn't start a game in central midfield, you're like, where the hell is Thomas Partey? They've got a few options there. So, yeah.
It is true. And Aaron's talking about the defence now. He's saying, no need to rate the Spurs defence. We play our game, we score, they panic. Do you think it's as simple as that? Like, so, I recall last season, it looked like they had one top in inverted commas defender, and that was Romero. And then we played them at their stadium. And so hang on, I've just had a message from Jason, our Spurs fan who got too drunk to join, saying that he has joined.
Oh, there he is.
Is he in the waiting room? Let him in.
Let him in. He's on the train.
I'm on a train. I didn't say I was on a train. Apologies.
Listen, what do you think it is? You can't just join this on a train.
You brought your own guest.
You said join. You said join when you can. I mean, this is when I can. I did. I did apologize.
Right. So listen.
I'm very sorry. Let's get into it. Because I know you guys have 30 minutes in. You've been waiting for me, so. Let's do this.
All right, brilliant. All right, so listen, mate. I don't know where we start necessarily, but we've just spent a lot of time talking about what we think and how we think Tottenham have been doing this season, etc. Doing and the difference that Conte is bringing. Yeah, we also talked about systems and we talked about how Arsenal were playing this season and how Tottenham have been. What do you think? Like when you look at this North London derby, can you predict quite comfortably how you think Spurs are going to approach this game? Right.
This is not happening, mate.
Right. Well, we've just got a still of his face, guys. His connection's gone. Just kick him out. Just kick him out. This is going to be incredibly confusing. Shocking. Not just yeah, exactly. Apologies. Anyway, apologies. Thank you, Kish. Comedy Value 101. Has he got a line on in his head? I didn't notice. Probably did. Where were we, Miles, before we gave the guy a shot?
We're talking about Conte.
Conte. Yes.
So there's some funny comments coming in. Some of them I don't get because I'm guessing they're private jokes between you and your mates, but not this one. That's quite funny.
Aaron is saying minor delays on the ground. It seemed very good, very funny indeed. What I was saying, he does look like Casemiro. That's true, Nish. Yeah, Jason does look like Casemiro. What I was saying, my point before Myers was about the fact was responding to Aaron's question and Aaron's point about Tottenham's defense last season. Romero was the player who everyone talked about being, kind of the best defender. And he was ruled out last minute against Arsenal in the big game at the end of the season. And we were all buoyed by it, weren't we? We were all kind of like, when you and me were at the game, we were in the concourse and we were thinking that's a huge injury. The omen is there for us. It didn't make a bloody bit of difference. We hardly got at them, So, Aaron's saying we play our game, we score, they panic. I mean, maybe that is true to some degree, but I suppose the bigger problem is us playing our game and being allowed to play our game. But let's just say it is true. And let's just say we do get to play our game. Do you rate Spurs' defense perhaps as little as Aaron does?
I think he's maybe being a little bit unkind to them. Is probably not the right word, but yeah, I think I think it's going to be I think it's going to be tougher than what Aaron is implying in that comment. I don't think they're going to necessarily panic because I think they know that if it stays tight, even at 1-0 down, they've got goals in the team to, well, they've got dangerous players in the team to hurt us for sure. I don't particularly so Romero's. It's interesting because I don't particularly rate Spurs' defense individually either. Like I know Romero's getting a lot of kind of positive reviews and like glowing reviews over this season and last season. And yeah, he seems like he's a good player. But when you look at their defense man for man, I don't think there's anyone that necessarily stands out. But again, it's more the Conte, the system that Conte has been able to implement. Right, they're going through it at the back every game. 5 at the back when they don't have the ball, and it might just be a game where they might be more than happy for us to dominate possession, which what we've seen so far this season indicates that. But at the same time, we've still got to break them down and we've got to get past them, and that is where we might struggle. Like even when you look at someone like Eric Dyer, like he's not a world-class defender, but in the right system with the right players around him, he is very, very effective. And I think that's what you could basically call Spurs, right? In general, across the pitch, they are very, very effective.
It's a really good way of describing them. That they definitely are effective. And I agree. And I think your point on Romero, as far, I was going to point this out, by the way. I was going to point this out. So Aaron is saying, why is Mize wearing white on the NLD preview episode? It's a nice white t-shirt. I'll give you that.
It's a Pokemon t-shirt, mate.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
I don't even like Pokemon, but yeah. I have no. Sorry, I don't know what to say. Yeah,
nothing to say.
Nothing to say, mate. I just wasn't even thinking before I changed this. Let's get rid of that comment. Yeah, I'm gonna put another one up.
Okay, I tell you what. Let's go to this other question, or another point. Sat says, "Amazing as Arsenal have been this season. I'm going for 4-2 Spurs. Wow." He says they're very good on the counter, and I think this is where Arsenal will get exposed. I mean, we've spoken about that, I guess. So far that the fact that we've lost one game. That one game was against United, and those goals were counter-attacking goals. So that is somewhere where we could get exposed. If we are going to get exposed, that's the only evidence of us getting exposed this season, if that makes sense. But Miza, I mean, 4-2 Spurs. That's a big scoreline. Teams. I can't remember the last time a team scored 4 goals at the Emirates. I'd probably have to think back to Liverpool opening day of the season a number of years ago. I can't think that. So I mean, that would be a big scoreline if it happened. Can you see something like that?
I don't think. No. Well, I mean, look, if I'm thinking that Spurs are going to win the game 4-2, I might as well not turn up, right? Like I can't see that happening. I'll be pretty bloody upset if that does happen, because I think we're a lot better than a 4-2 scoreline at home to Spurs, a 4-2 loss at home to Spurs. So that's not how I think the game, or I definitely don't think the game's going to end like that. It could potentially. I personally don't think it's going to be high scoring. I think it has every potential to be high scoring because I think you've got, as we've touched on, right, 2 very dangerous teams going forward, 2 teams that have goals in them. And to be honest, 2 teams that have defensive frailties. You saw it against us, and I think you can definitely get at Spurs as well. So yeah, I mean, look, to answer Sat, or to kind of just touch on his prediction specifically for me, no, I don't think it's going to be 4-2 Spurs. I think it'll be a bit more of a positive result for us. But he makes a good point, right? Like Spurs have that ability in them, as we've seen so far this season. And Son, he didn't. Like specifically Son, he didn't really have a great start to the season, but it just exploded against Leicester out of nowhere. And now he's probably absolutely kind of buzzing for this one, as probably most of the other Spurs players are. And yeah. I mean, could you see it being 4-2?
I can't see it being 4-2, but I think that it's probably... Sometimes it's hard to predict a scoreline, right? Because it's in some ways easier to predict how a game will pan out than the scoreline. And I think that the problem with 4-2, that can either happen, I think, in 2 ways. 4-2 can either happen because Tottenham score early and we just try our best to try and get back in the game, and then they keep countering, basically. So it's just from a byproduct of us trying to get back in the game, maybe losing our discipline and heads because it's a big game. And the other way that you can concede 4 goals at home is purely individual errors. Like if it's just a terrible kind of set of individual errors. I don't see the latter happening. I don't think that we were a team with lots of individual errors in us anymore. Like we might make one in a game. We might basically, 4's a lot at home. And I think, like you say, with the crowd behind you at home, it's a little bit different. Nish's point, as a Liverpool fan, Conte's Spurs remind me so much of Benitez Liverpool with better forwards. Will be a good matchup. That's a good point, don't you think? I mean, system-wise, I think you went for effective, right, when you described them, and I think Benitez's Liverpool side were pretty effective in that way, right? And I know Nish, as well as other Liverpool fans, I don't think were enthralled by the kind of type of football it was necessarily, and wanted good football. It's interesting, isn't it? Because Liverpool have a bigger pedigree than that. So I think with Liverpool, fans are probably more likely to demand good football because it's part of their DNA. Tottenham don't care really, do they? I think they claim that they do, but ultimately he's their best chance of winning a trophy in many years. So I don't think they will care.
Loads of questions and comments.
Excellent. We love it. Miles, why don't you take this question? So the question from Aaron: do we stick with a tried and trusted 11 this season, or bring in KT and Stroke or Tommy?
I see no reason to bring in Tomiyasu, which is probably slightly different to how I thought how the season would go in terms of that right back slot. Tomiyasu made it his own last season, and we really struggled. Well, not so much we really struggled, but again, you saw the drop off when Cedric came into the team.
Yeah.
But Ben White, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because I wouldn't be unhappy with either Ben White or Tomiyasu starting, but then I kind of really want Ben White in the team because he's done pretty well in that position. And then it just means that naturally it's a Saliba, Gabriel centre-back pairing, if that makes sense. So kind of keeps everyone happy. And I think it's been working quite well. And I think also you could argue, I don't know if it's necessarily true or not, you could argue Ben White's, I was going to say he's a better defender than Tomiyasu. Maybe he's not necessarily a better defender, but the fact that he's a centre-back, I don't know, maybe he just might be able to deal with some of Spurs' threats a little bit more, or a little bit better than Tomiyasu might. And maybe he's more naturally inclined to play a slightly more defensive role against a team that is obviously, like we keep saying, got quite a lot of talent going forward. And then what was the other? Bring in KT. I mean, I think it's more a fitness thing, isn't it? I like Zinchenko. So what were we saying about Zinchenko? So obviously Tierney's been playing for us. He's been starting the last few games because Zinchenko's been injured. Did you say Zinchenko played? Did Zinchenko play?
I don't think Zinchenko went to Ukraine. Someone can correct, if someone wants to correct me, they can, feel free. But I don't think he did go. But I think obviously KT did and got his head injury.
Yeah. That would be an interesting one, actually. Assuming they're both fit. Like, who do you? Because you've obviously got, like, we don't have to go into like the pros and cons or the kind of the attributes of both players and what they're both good at, but because we've talked about it before and it's pretty obvious. But like, who do you think would be best suited for a game like this, on the assumption that you've got Kulusevski down their right hand side?
I think that when you're at home, I think you sort of have to go with your plan A, whatever the case, personally. And so I think that I would want him to start, Arteta to start, just, kind of based on fitness. If fitness will be the biggest thing, to kind of go with how he wants, and I think that would mean that if everyone was fit, he may well start with Zinchenko and he may well start with Ben White. You can change it during the game, like you can. I just feel like you've got to give the players confidence as well, right? When they go out, to think that they are the dominant team and that you believe in them. And I think showing that you believe in them is plan A. I think sometimes it's easy though to forget how good KT and Tommy were at their best last season. That, at the moment, we've started well this season, and therefore Zinchenko coming into the team at the start when Tierney was injured, Zinchenko is playing really well and Ben White's been playing really well at the right. They almost, in our minds, therefore are our plan A. Maybe they aren't plan A. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's unfair to call them plan A. And Tomiyasu, I personally actually believe Tomiyasu is arguably our best defender. I think that in terms of just, he reminds me of Azpilicueta for Chelsea. You know, I think he's just someone who is a very good footballer and is a very good defender. You can put him anywhere, and I think he'll do smart things. So there's a part of me that actually thinks that, you know, maybe he would be a really good choice, and, you know, if not a better choice than Ben White. But if I was to, you know, if you were to put a gun to my head and ask me to write the lineup right now, I'd probably actually put Tierney in, and I'd put Ben White at right back, and that's Tierney's thing is fitness. So I think probably just because clearly like Zinchenko has been struggling for a little while. You know, let Tierney start. And because I think Tierney's playing good football as well against Brentford, he was good going forward and good defensively. But I think Ben White, I think he deserves it, because I think he has been brilliant this season.
I'm going to bring Jason back in because it looks like he's a bit more settled.
Okay.
1 second. Let's see if this works.
Just about. I don't know. Just about.
Just in case we lose you, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to introduce yourself because you haven't got time for that. You basically did that,
fine.
right?
Yeah.
And Nish said you look like Casemiro.
Yeah. What's new?
And listen, very good. Why don't you take this question that's come up immediately, Jason? Yeah. So just again to reiterate, Jason is a Spurs fan, and so we've got a little window of Jason before we finish. So let's focus on you, Jason. So this question: which attacking trio would you take? Kane, Son, Kulusevski, or Jesus, Martinelli, and Saka?
I mean, you're asking a Spurs fan this, of course. It's an obvious question. Look.
Well, why don't you break that question down a little bit more, right? Break that question down a little bit more. So, you know, out of those players there, I mean, what do you? You obviously Kane and Son; these are world-class players, and Kulusevski's come in your team and done ever so well, right? If you contrast them against those three Arsenal boys, what do you think the gap is? Do you think that there's still a big difference?
I think player for player in terms of position, if we were to sort of compare Jesus to Kane, like if you asked me to pick one of the two of them, I think he's more complete as a striker. He can do it all. No questions asked about that. I think obviously with Jesus, you know, coming from City to Arsenal, he's obviously added value to what your team needs at the moment. But honestly speaking, if I had to pick one of the two of them, I'll pick Kane, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think most people would. You know, what would you compare? Son and Martinelli? Yeah, same thing. I mean, Golden Boot winner last season. You know, you can't question that. Obviously, he started off with a bit of a dry spell this season, but it was never in doubt the sort of goals that he will score, and it will come back with him. And that was evident against Leicester in the second half. And I think taking a step back, because I'm trying to cram in all the information I've crammed in just to get into this call, I think it's the way we'll set up on Saturday, which is going to be interesting more for Spurs than it probably would be for Arsenal. I think it's a strong chance that we could get overrun in midfield if we started with two central midfielders, with Højbjerg and Bentancur, with your three there. But if we started with Kane and Son up top and had Basuma, Bentancur and Højbjerg in midfield, I think we would run right against you guys. I have no doubt about that.
It's very bullish to say you have no doubts about it, because you'd have no basis for that right this season. But I mean, Basuma's not really.
That's my bad.
How many drinks have you had, mate?
Yeah, exactly. So let's just try, because you know, let's try and get a serious point in there, Jason. So you know, because look, I think it's a fair point around kind of just the numbers game. You know, you're talking about a 2 in midfield versus a 3 in midfield, right?
Yeah.
But you know, if you play that alternative system that you've mentioned, that's not something that Spurs have done this. So to come to the team, probably the form team, you know, the team who are top of the league right now, playing kind of pretty good football, coming there at home in the North London derby and doing something like that to your system, when actually you're doing well yourselves, like this season, you're doing really well. So you're kind of you're going away from your own plan A. Don't you think that's a bit of a gamble?
Yeah, but then if you look at the game against Leicester, it was literally a tale of two halves. I mean, the goals that we scored in the first half to keep us in there with 2-2 were coming from set pieces. And I think they're really good on that sort of point. Second half is when we sort of changed the position, formation, and we really went for it, that's where I probably saw Spurs playing at their best.
But this
probably
is
more
Leicester,
control.
this is Leicester, Jason, though, isn't it? This is Leicester. Leicester are
I mean, yeah,
arguably
that's probably what most of the Arsenal fans were saying in the pub as well when they were giving me shit about it. But I mean, you know, it is Leicester, yeah. But what do you want to say? But
no.
truth be
But I'm
told,
saying
in the
using
first,
that as
you
an
know,
example, right? As in
yeah,
the problem is with Leicester, right? Like, and I said it even as an Arsenal fan, right? When
yeah,
we beat Leicester, they were a little bit of a joke because you basically every time they scored, it was just almost like a guaranteed goal at the other end. They were just like a complete and utter shambles.
yeah.
And this season they've conceded more goals than any team in the Premier League history at this point of the season. So you could probably play like, you know, you could play your plan G, and you're probably going to still score goals, right? You know, again, like, yeah, but I mean, not to kind of really throw away your point. I guess your point is kind of you did something different and it worked better.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, like you mentioned before, you've got a world class player in Son who's come off the bench and he scored a hat trick, and he's a world class player. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, he's a top player. But okay, like I mean, so look. A couple of things there, though, right? Like you as a Spurs fan, you've seen you guys play this season, and you know you've watched them in a lot more detail than we have, and it's very easy for me and I think Mize to kind of say, well, look, like actually it looks like they've been not playing very well, and they've been playing like really kind of boring football and this and the other. You tell me, like, what's your take on Spurs this season? You're doing well in the league, so the position's fine, points are fine. In terms of how you're playing, are you pleased with how you're playing? Are you enjoying being a Spurs fan?
I've always enjoyed being a Spurs fan. This is for all the other Spurs fans who might be watching at the moment. Never in doubt. Do I enjoy the way we're playing at the moment? Possibly not. We're very, very structured in what we're doing. You know, the way we sort of set up is to sort of soak up the pressure and hit teams on a counter attack. I think we haven't really controlled games as much as we would have probably liked to, in comparison to how we were sort of chasing things, you know, top four last season. But like I said, it was against Leicester is a tale of two halves where we actually changed formation, which is something that I haven't really seen happen so far this season. I've seen personnel change. I've seen players being taken off and then sort of replacements come on again, sort of going out for attack, whether it's midfield or defense, but not really sort of change the formation. And that's when I sort of thought, you know what, we're constantly throughout the season getting overrun in midfield, right? Fair enough. We've got players like Romero and Lanea or Davis in sort of defense that can hold this. I'm not entering Dyer because let's leave that for another time. But who's that guy? So I'm just reading the comments.
For those joining who can't see the video, Chana's left a message saying enjoy not winning trophies, LOL, directed to
I'm used to not winning trophies. It is what it is, you know? I might not like winning a trophy at some point, you know what I mean? I might, you know, if Spurs ever manage to win a trophy, I'm like, what is this feeling like? I don't know what it's like. I'm not used to it. So no, we'll see what happens. I'm just quite as level-headed as possible in terms of you know, expectations towards the end of the season. But yeah, I think this is more, like I said, down to Spurs, and Conte's got the big decisions to make come Saturday. I would like to see us with three in midfield. I would like to see Son play closer to Kane up top. You know, three at the back as usual. Conte will never change from that sort of formation, and you know, try it that way. Really, you know, I think.
Do you think arguably though this is Conte's strength though? He almost, because you know you're very much speaking as a Tottenham fan, and I would probably say the same thing about you, where I'd probably same thing as you in the sense that you know you're going to your big rival, and you it's not enjoyable watching a game where you're conceding possession and you know getting overrun in some areas. But don't you think one of his biggest strengths is not caring about any of that and saying, listen, like I know how to play big games. I can win big games. I went to City last season, took 6 points. I don't need anyone to tell me what to do. So if the fans are moaning about how I'm going to set up, I can care less. I don't care what they think. I'll do what I have to do. Do you think arguably that's his biggest strength?
I mean, his biggest strength is not caring what I think. I think a lot of people don't care what I think as well is their biggest strength. But no, I think he will. But, you know, to sort of make, you know, anxious Spurs fans less anxious, you know, you don't want to be seeing your team constantly, you know, sort of soaking up pressure because, you know, at the end of the day, honestly speaking, we're still Spurs, you know, he's still there for some sort of mistake to happen, you know, a possible penalty, possible red card. Don't want to jinx it, but being Lloris at times, you know, he has good moments, he has bad moments. And what do? You put yourself on the back foot because that's the sort of way you set yourself up? Or do you come out, you know, on a sort of more attacking front and say, right, let's not let this happen to us. Let's try a little bit further. So, Yeah, I mean that's my view. I very much, I think he would go with the two in midfield, see what happens. I think he'll probably start the same team that started against Leicester, possibly with the change of taking out Sessegnon and putting Perisic back on the left, and then putting maybe Royal on the right hand side to give us that little bit of balance. But I don't think, as you say, I don't think it will change much. But yeah.
That's interesting, mate. So you think so that kind of connected to Kish's point here. Kish is saying curious to see if Son gets a nod.
Of course, Kish has got something to say, isn't it?
But he's saying curious to see if Son gets a nod. Personally, seeing 2-2 as a result, wouldn't be surprised if a red card is shown early. So just on that first point, so you think it will be the same as Leicester. So you think Son might not start even after scoring a hat trick?
No, I think he probably will start. I think we will go with the two in midfield. I don't want us to start that way, but I think Kane, Kulusevski, and Son will be the front three.
Okay.
But I would prefer it to be Kane and Son with Kulusevski and Richarlison on the bench to come on if things are not working well. Starting with three in midfield. Yeah.
I want to talk to you about your defense a little bit. We spoke earlier on the episode, and Aaron, and when he left a comment, and he was not very complimentary about your defense, and Myers was actually much more respectful about how he thought Spurs' back five are, and kind of described them as effective, kind of like the rest of your team. What's your take? Because you referred to Dyer there, who actually a lot of people have been very complimentary about this season. I think he's sort of seemingly been doing okay this season, and it's Romero who is maybe losing out on his place to Sanchez every now and again. So what's your take on the Tottenham defense and back five right now?
I'll try my best to clear this up. I mean, I have no insight, but Romero's not really losing his place to Sanchez. It's more injuries or anything else. He's giving him a rest, right? There's a lot more games, Champions League football. I mean, yeah, okay, fair enough. Maybe you guys are not involved, but yeah, Champions League football, other fixtures involved. And it's just about getting minutes, Players like Romero who go all out, they're prone to get, niggles here, there, and the other. So it's about keeping everyone fresh. It's about having good squad rotation, and that's the way I think we're looking at it. Leicester, as you say, the team that conceded the most goals gave Sanchez a chance, and he had a few. He conceded a penalty. Shaky moments there. He's not as reliable as he could have been, in previous games and stuff. But I have no doubts about Romero. I think, the whole defense, there are improvements as windows go along. I think Dyer is not one to sort of be there for the future. And I think if Conte trusted these defense, he wouldn't be starting with three of them. He would be going for back four. Yeah. If he did trust them. We haven't got to that stage yet. We're still improving. We're still rebuilding, and it's a slow process. I think the only player that he probably relies on at the moment is Romero.
But didn't he play a back three at Inter anyway? Yeah. Isn't this and he did it with Chelsea when Chelsea won the league. Isn't this something that he just does?
Yeah, he probably does. But I think if he had a lot more confidence in some of the players, he could be changing the formations a lot more. And I think the defense-wise, there's a lot of room for improvement there. It does make me nervous every time a team's attacking, and you're seeing, Lloris in goal, and who, like I said, I don't want to jinx it, but he's prone to an error every now and again. He does pull out some really good saves and does save us a lot in games, but there is the odd flap and stuff. And the defense-wise, if you're constantly getting put under pressure where a team is fully on attacking you, there's bound to be a mistake. There's bound to be a lapse of concentration. And what you're doing there is waiting to sort of soak up that pressure, because you've got a couple of good defenders that can hold it out, and then you're trying to sort of hit other teams on a counter-attack. It work most of the times. I don't think it'll work all of the time. You can't be playing that way all season. I know we're already 6-7 games in, but that can't be the way to sort of set up. And I'm hoping that Saturday I'm personally speaking, just being optimistic, we give it a bit more of a go. I know Arsenal's going to come at us. There's no doubt about it. And I just feel nervous, early kickoff after the international break, North London derby at your ground, you're going to come at us. Yes. I think it was said in the comments about me being on shit. I'll be on there a lot more now, if come Saturday when this is happening. So, yeah, It is. It's a nervy time. I mean,
that's interesting. I'd be really interested if this game is going to be a real kind of bloodbath and a kind of toe to toe thing.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'd be surprised if that's the case, but it'll be amazing to watch if it is. I mean, let's just go to Nish's question here, Miles. Maybe you take this first. You're basically saying there's too much focus on the front three, chat. It's the midfield creativity that will win this. City's front three have never been a huge focus in the past few years. Liverpool struggling without midfield. What do you think about this, Miles? Because, as we talked earlier on in the episode, the midfield has been quite an important and interesting area for Arsenal this season. Tottenham have actually, arguably, like Jason said, relied much less on the center of their midfield in terms of kind of their kind of attacking output, if you like. What do you think about it? Do you agree with Nisha's comment?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think it's hard to ignore the two sets of forward players that Spurs and Arsenal have got, because they're just so talented, right? Even when Jason, you were sort of saying, you were giving your rationale for why you'd pick basically the Spurs front three over ours. Fair enough. But I think you've probably, the Arsenal front three, especially Gabriel Jesus, have got their merits as well. And I think, there's probably a lot of teams in the league that would definitely take Martinelli. They'll definitely take Saka, and they'll definitely take Gabriel Jesus. So that's quite, in terms of just trying to almost work out or decide or see who comes out on top on Saturday. That is going to be really interesting. I think that's probably why there's a focus on those attacking players. I mean, I think with Arsenal, if I just speak about Arsenal midfield creativity, like we're not I feel like we've become a team now that is able to score all different types of goals. You saw it against Brentford, for example. We scored a set piece goal. The second goal was, good build up play. Granit Xhaka basically putting in a perfect cross, and we've now got that striker that's there in the right positions to finish. And then the third goal was, basically a bit of a wonder strike from Vieira. And I think you've seen that this season now from Arsenal, where we can play football when we need to, and we can sort of almost grind out a goal, like I say, set piece or otherwise, get a bit of a scrappy goal if we need to. So, I mean, I think potentially it could be really important on Saturday, in terms of midfield creativity, or in terms of how we create chances. And I think, Jason, you were saying you expect Arsenal to come at you, and you expect probably Arsenal to have a fair bit of the ball, maybe more of the ball than Spurs will. And I think if that happens, then I think Arsenal will create chances, because I think we're just everyone just knows, like it feels like, and I've said this before on this podcast, right? It feels like Arsenal, this Arsenal team under Arteta are now playing how Arteta wants them to play when we have the ball. And it feels like everything they're practicing on the training ground in terms of positional play, in terms of how we transition from back to front, in terms of when Ødegaard gets the ball, where Saka needs to be, where Jesus needs to be, all of that kind of stuff. I feel like it's all falling into place, or it has so far this season anyway. And hence why we've been looking so dangerous. And even when you watch like the highlights of the Brentford game as an example, and probably most of the games this season, we're creating so many good chances. It's not just we scored 3 goals against Brentford and that was it. Jesus probably should have got a couple of goals, and I'm pretty sure there's a couple of other chances there as well. So yeah, it's a fair point from Nish. I don't know how you feel, guys, about it.
Direct that to Jason. I mean, Jason, tell me about that. I mean, because I do think that there is an interesting point in there generally about Tottenham this season. I'll say it again, you're doing very well this season, points wise, right? So however you guys have been doing it, you've been doing it, but the stats are showing that very little of the ball is spent in the middle third. There's a load of time that is spent kind of in your own third. And that would seemingly suggest that it may not have anything to do with the defense. It may just, it could suggest the midfield keeps getting bypassed for you guys. But hey, you're finding ways to get points up. So what do you think? I mean, because it sounds to me actually like, like you were saying before, you'd rather see you play 3 in midfield and actually and see that change, right?
Yeah,
you would
definitely.
Rather.
Sorry, I stopped listening a long time ago. Now I'm joking.
Well, actually, just expanding on a specific point there, right? Because you said Basuma, we mentioned something earlier on in the episode where Conte has said that Bissouma is the one player in the squad who hasn't necessarily understood his tactical demands yet.
Yeah.
He said words to that effect. What do you think about that? Does that interest you? Does that concern you in any way?
No, not at all. I think that the sort of timing at which I think Conte wants all of his players brought in early, like most managers would do, want most of their players brought in as early as possible pre-season. From what I've seen from clips and sort of other things, where it's probably one of the most grueling pre-seasons that any of the Spurs players have been going through at the moment, in terms of the training and what they actually went through. It's more to what they're not used to. And I think Bissouma is probably, you can say he may have been a sort of good player in a poorer team, in no disrespect to Brighton, but that's possibly what it is. And now he's sort of trying to build up to the sort of stamina, the standards that's required by Conte and so forth. I think I would have said anyone else, it could have been Skip if it wasn't for injuries. He's sort of coming back, but Bissouma just seems to be the one at the moment that's there. And I'm just, like I said, I'm just recording the second half of how literally it's a tale of two halves against Leicester, of how he sort of set up earlier on, how we're still getting overrun by them. The goals we sort of scored came from set pieces. Fair enough, Leicester are very leaky in the back, but that's how he was scoring. And then straight away, second half, Bissouma came on, gave us a little bit more balance. Son was playing closer towards Kane, took Kulusevski off. Not that Kulusevski had a bad game at all. It was just the way we did. And all of a sudden, you can see the difference. But yeah, and that's the sort of last impression that I was sort of given from this. But we weren't given many moments of that throughout the sort of games we played so far this season. And that's the sort of takeaway that I'm looking at. It's like, right, look how we played. We got Son that's come off the bench, 13 minutes, hat-trick, played with Bissouma in midfield, and we were just constantly getting forward more. Fair enough, you can see Leicester were probably deflated at that moment, but we sort of took it to them. Son took it to them as well. And to be fair, if Son's not playing well, Spurs are not playing well. That's as simple as that, the way I look at it.
Isn't that simple, mate? Because again, you've got points this season, and he's arguably only.
We're being pragmatic about it, and the way we sort of set up. But it's not, when Son is playing well, and he was playing well towards the end of last season when we managed to sort of push for top four. It was because of Son, I think, and so far this season he hasn't really sort of got himself into the right positions and got himself the right moments to be scoring goals. And I think there was probably a heavier weight on his shoulders of expectation of how to deliver. And you can tell he's a very sort of player that plays off the confidence. If he gets his head down, that's it straight for him. But getting that hat trick, I think it's a game changer. But to go back to start him and then not give him the sort of tools to sort of attack and go forward, I think that's certainly going to be the what to look out for come Saturday. Yeah, I think personally. But,
okay, so we've been recording for about an hour and 7 minutes. So I want to get in predictions mode before I get into asking predictions just for the game, because I think it'll be nice to end on that. Jason, tell me a little bit about what you think overall for Tottenham this season. Now, at the end of the day, last season you finished in the top four, and Arsenal finished fifth, and we all know how that went, and
we all laughed about it as well. Let's not forget that. So.
Some people laughed about it. Myers and I certainly didn't laugh.
Some people started following certain podcasts as well after that.
Yeah, our viewers randomly did go up for particularly for one episode of that. But anyway, look, what my point is, Tottenham you got in the top four. You got playing Champions League football. You went out in the summer and made a number of signings. Arsenal made a number of signings, and other clubs around. Man United have made some signings, etc., etc. All in all, everything taken into account, how Tottenham have started, what you've seen from the other teams. What do you think? What are your predictions for Tottenham this season? I mean, assume that you haven't had about 10 pints. And just kind of come to as much of a level head as you can. What do you expect of Tottenham this season?
I don't think much has changed since my sort of summer predictions. I think definitely a top four finish, third.
So that's obviously what you want. So you think you will finish third?
Yeah, I think City and even Liverpool. I mean, don't get me wrong, Liverpool might have had a little blip earlier on, but they'll always come strong. You know, it's a long season. There's a World Cup in the middle. You know, there's a lot to play for. I think they're still the two front runners. I think you know, Spurs, Arsenal, and Chelsea as well. You know, they've got a lot to catching up to do in terms of that. So I think mostly Spurs will probably finish third. It'll be a closer gap. I think, you know, the gap, obviously looking at last season's points, you know, was much bigger, but I think it'll be smaller this time. Not so much. I think there'll be much more closer games, a lot more results focused. But do I see Spurs winning the league this season? No. Do I see Spurs win the league this season? Let's wait and see. But yeah, top four finish, I think, is probably what it is.
And how then, in terms of your cup competitions, can you see, you know, and do you think that particularly Champions League football, do you it sounds like by saying that you'll finish third, it sounds like what you're also predicting is that you'll manage that quite well. You manage Champions League and Premier League quite well, you think? Okay. Yeah,
I think so. I think we'll get a decent run in the cup competitions. I'm being optimistic for a trophy. Everyone wants to win a trophy. But yeah, I'm not having sort of major expectations to have one this season. I think it's going to be a much tougher challenge, I think.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well, look, in terms of the game itself, we're only a couple of days away. I mean, it's Wednesday evening, and it's going to be Saturday midday pretty soon. Before we know it, we know that there's a lot. It'll be very interesting to see what the managers come out and say with regards to injuries, because I think that there are a few question marks on both sides. It seems like, although the question marks with Tottenham, I think there were some question marks around Lloris, around Romero, around, I want to say at least one other player. But it seems like actually they're probably going to be okay. It feels like Arsenal have got a couple more question marks around Zinchenko, Partey, and Tierney, for example, and Tomiyasu. But assuming, you know, let's just assume everything is okay, and let's just say everyone is, you know, actually, you know, for even just forget that. Let's just go straight to the prediction. Mize, you know, how do you think it's going to go? What do you think the score's going to be?
So I think both teams are pretty even, to be honest, in terms of obviously in terms of form, and I can see there being a fair bit of cancelling out on both sides. So I think it's going to be a pretty tight game. I can't see there being loads of goals. I'm kind of picturing this. I'm basically picturing it being pretty tight up until the last 10 minutes, like a 1-1, and then there might be a winner, either due to, like, for some reason I've got this like premonition that Eddie's going to come on and score the winner. I don't know why, but I can see that happening, and I'm hoping that's going to happen. Or equally, I can definitely see something similar to what happened with us against United, where there might be, like I say, it might be a tight game, and there might just be one lapse of concentration, one defender steps out at the wrong time and leaves a gaping hole in behind, or something like that. And Spurs, like we keep saying, right, they're effective. They've got players that essentially know how to finish, or know how to take a chance when it comes, and that's my worry. So yeah, I'm the Arsenal fan in me is going to say 2-1 Arsenal, but I think it's going to be pretty tight. And like you said, Raj, I think it's going to be a nervy one. Like last season, that game was like, I think it was pretty much the first half. We just like blew them.
I think it was
the home game
after 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure. Like I just can't see that happening 2 years in a row, basically, as well. So I think Arsenal will play well. I think we will create chances, like I said before. But I think there's a threat. There's obviously a threat from Spurs, and I think both teams are fairly even and fairly evenly matched up. And yeah, I'm going to go 2-1 still, but yeah, a bit cautiously saying that.
Okay. And Jason, you've said how you'd like Tottenham to play, and you know how you'd like to, in terms of just how you think, taking into account how you think you'll set up and how you think Conte will want to approach the game. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm caught in two minds for this one, because I think the omens are saying, Spurs away from home so far this season, against Chelsea, against West Ham, were the draws that we've got. Fair enough, we're still undefeated, but those are the draws. And this being the third sort of London derby, it sort of seems that way. But yeah, I would like to say a win. I'd like to say a 2-0 Spurs win, just because I'm on this podcast and I can. So yeah, I'm gonna say when I'll be invited again next, not anytime soon, that's for sure. So yeah, I'll go 2-0 Spurs.
Okay, so you're basically saying your rationale tells you it will be a draw, but you're just gonna say 2-0 anyway. That's what you're gonna say.
I'm letting the drinks come in, mate. That's it.
Right, so out of all the Spurs fans in the world that we could have picked, right? We get you, and your like insight at the end. You're fucking icing on the cake is like, yeah, like all the fucking evidence says it's going to be a draw, but I'm going to go 2-0 because I'm on the podcast and I can.
Yeah, I'm invited for a reason, right?
Beginning to wonder what that reason was. Anyway, listen. All right, like Miles, do you have any closing comments or questions for our lovely friend?
Thanks for joining, albeit a little bit late. It was good to definitely good to have a different perspective on the game. It very interesting, actually. I found it really interesting. So no, thanks for joining. And no, I wouldn't say you'd never be invited back on, mate.
There's pressure now.
Let's see how the result goes on Saturday. Who knows?
We'll see.
Brilliant. Jason, listen, mate. Thank you very much for joining in the end.
Raj, you didn't give your prediction, Raj.
I didn't give up. Oh yeah, I haven't given my prediction.
That, yeah.
I actually I was a bit all over the place and thinking how it was going to go. But actually, when Kish put his 2-2 up in the screen, I sort of looked at it and I thought, you know what, I think that's highly possible. I think it's going to be a tight game. I don't know. Like I genuinely don't know if it's going to be a game where it's Arsenal chasing the goal at the end. In a way, I can see that. I can see maybe like Tottenham actually ending up going 2-1 up and Arsenal chasing and Arsenal getting an equaliser. I can see that. Yeah, that's probably the scenario I see a little bit more of. Unfortunately, I do think that game will pan out how at the beginning, how I thought it would be, in the sense that I think Arsenal will try and dominate the ball, and I think Spurs will try and counter. I think Conte will do what he thinks Tottenham have been doing well this season. And I think that probably won't be like fun to watch necessarily if you're a Spurs fan. But at the same time, there's every chance. I think Maizina made the point before, like, when you've got players like Son and Kane, it's just one chance sometimes. You know what I mean? One counter and then it's 1-0. And then when it's 1-0, it's a completely different ball game. It's so hard to play against teams who are counter-attacking when you're goal down. So yeah, I'm going to be a bit cautious and I'm going to go with 2-2. That's my prediction. So we've got a full suite, right? We've got Miles with the win, Arsenal win, me with the draw, Jason with the Spurs win. So hey, look, may the best team win. Miles and I obviously hope it's going to be Arsenal. We're very lucky to be there at the game. And it's 12 o'clock kickoff, so we're going to have to get the beers in a bit early, but I'm sure we'll get at least enough to get us feeling a bit merry, shall we say, and letting the songs come out. Jason, you're not going to be in the away end this game, are you?
No, next game for me is Frankfurt Champions League. Oh, sorry. Yeah, just making you aware.
You've got to love Spurs fans, haven't you? You've got absolutely nothing to be cocky about, apart from a few seasons of Champions League football. But they still find a way.
Yeah. You got to take the wins where they come, man. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not winning trophies, then it's just if you finish above Arsenal, it's a trophy, isn't it?
Well, for some people, I mean, I'll take that, mate. But yeah.
All right, brilliant. All right, thanks, guys. Let's call it a night. It's been one of our longest episodes. So I think that shows how much fun we were having. Chard is just still hanging in there. He's really just so you know, Jason Chard is another season ticket holder at Arsenal who sits quite near us. So he's got no love lost there for Tottenham.
Yeah,
so
you can hold
respect.
Hold that in his pocket. Good one.
All right, guys.
All right.
Thank you for everyone for joining us. Can you please, if you did enjoy this episode, as usual, like, share, subscribe. I forget to say that at the start, but I was so incensed with Jason not turning up on time. It just threw me off, So please
finish strong though. That's the main thing.
If anyone's still watching, that is, yeah. Do that. So yeah, please subscribe and share and click. What buttons do they have to click, Myers? What's the stuff? There's a thumbs up, isn't there? There's a thumbs up somewhere.
YouTube, thumbs up,
YouTube,
subscribe,
thumbs up,
notifications, all that stuff.
All that
I think everyone that's watching has probably already done that already, but worth saying anyway.
Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining us. Like, really appreciate the participation. And yeah, man. Jason, thank you again. Thank you again. You know, one of the few guests that we've ever had.
Thank you.
You know, certainly one of the most memorable. So excellent. All right, everyone. Good night.
Cheers, guys. Take it easy.
Yes, thanks. Bye.
Bye.